Hello and welcome to another episode of The Hot Seat. I'm your host, Matt Randall from Timberwolf Coaching, and I'm here today with Phil Chura of Chura's Photography to get a little geeky talking about photographs, smartphones, Photoshop, and how we can all make our photos look a little bit nicer with a little bit of modern technology. So Phil, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, Matt, for having me.
Phil, I've got to ask, I am not real techno-geeky about certain things, so I know that I use my phone a lot for taking photos. They're not the best quality. Obviously, you have much more expensive cameras that can do a better job than my phone can, but they've come a long way. For those people who don't understand what cell phones are capable of today, can you help fill us in a little bit?
Well, I just recently came back from St. Thomas, and by chance, I lost my cell phone. Well, they replaced it with a new model, and I was just amazed at the difference between the one I had purchased a couple years ago and the one I have right now.
Okay. And what's the difference?
Quality, clarity, definition. I mean, their cell phone is a camera too.
Okay.
People use it to take pictures. They use it to take videos. And 2 years ago, when I started riding my bicycle, I mean, for me to bicycle around with a 30-pound DSLR wasn't going to happen, not at my age. All right?
Not at any age.
So I reluctantly took my cell phone. All right? And after a year of riding, I'm looking back at it and I'm saying, wow. Wow, what a difference. But I can also see a little bit difference between the older phone that I had, which is supposedly the same model, and the new one. So it could have been software upgrades or maybe little internal upgrades and things like that on a phone. But okay. The phones that they have today are fantastic.
Well, now speaking of that, everybody when they talk about photos and phones, it's all about megapixels. What are megapixels? Why is that important? Everybody's saying, you know, the newer phone is coming out with twice as many megapixels. Do people really need that? So what is a megapixel? How does that work?
Well, you can easily find how many megapixels your camera is if you open it up. And it'll actually give you the number of pixels, vertical and horizontal, all right? Your X and Y. So let's say, for instance, you read it and it says 3,000 pixels by 4,000 pixels. Well, you multiply the two together and you got 12 megapixels.
So 3 times 4 is 12 megapixels.
All right, 3 times 4,000 is 12 megapixels, so 3,000 by 4,000. So it's 4,000 by 5,000, then it'll be a 20 megapixel camera.
All right. Now, in terms of megapixels, let's assume that somebody's going to take a photo and they want to have that printed. The megapixels determine how large you can print this before you end up with what kind of problems?
Okay. The rule of thumb is basically a 12 megapixel camera will create a grade 8 by 10.
Okay.
All right. A 16 megapixel camera will create a good 11 by 14. A 24 megapixel camera is a 16 by 20 with no enhancements. There's a way to get around it. All right. And the thing of it is, 12 megapixel cameras were standard for many, many years. All right. I have a photograph in my lobby. All right. Of my daughter's wedding. It was shot like 12 years ago. All right, shot with a 6 megapixel camera. It is a 40-inch photograph. It looks great.
So if somebody's going to do a family portrait, a larger size, 20 by 30 or 40 inch, as you're saying, and hang it over the mantle, they don't necessarily need to have or upgrade to the latest phone to make that happen.
No, you can, as long as it has like a 8 or 12 megapixel, and I'm saying 12 better, higher is better, but a 12 megapixel camera and with the proper enhancements, you can create a 20-inch photograph from it. I mean, I can. All right. I had a client of mine, him and his wife, just came back from Eastern Europe. All right, she was actually born there. They took a photograph, and he says, Phil, he says, my favorite photograph was I captured at Christmas time in my wife's hometown. So I said, well, don't send it over the internet. Bring it into the studio, and I'll get it right off your camera so I can work with every pixel on it, and I'll see how large of a photograph I can create for you. I created for him a 30-inch photograph.
Wow.
It was actually ended up, without losing a pixel, 17 inches by 30 inches. So it was narrow and long, but that's what you get from the cell phones today.
That's amazing. So the average person printing an 8x10 doesn't need to have, you know, the latest, greatest, most expensive smartphone in the world to make that happen. If need be, if they need to go larger, you can enhance that using technology.
Correct.
And that's one of the things we wanted to talk about today is enhancing your cell phone photos or your smartphone photos using things like Photoshop, which you're an expert in.
I started using Photoshop when I was about 20 years ago, and I had almost a full head of hair. Photoshop is one of those software programs you can't learn overnight. It takes years and years and years of practice. So I guess that comes from my engineering background. You know, I'm a problem solver, so giving a problem, I'll just go back and I'll keep working through it, and eventually I'll find it. But there's so many tricks that you can get into Photoshop to enhance that a lot of people don't know. And you know, and it's just the fact that you just can't pick up the software, buy it for a couple $100 and throw it there and say, yep, I'm an expert. It doesn't happen that way.
Now, I've owned Photoshop before, because I thought for whatever reason I had to spend the money on that software. And I learned really well how to crop things. And I don't think it was worth the price to learn how to crop, because you can do that with almost anything. I learned how to take a color and make it black and white. Beyond that, though, you showed me some really good work that I'd like to share with the audience today, and maybe you can help explain what you've done at a more professional level.
Okay.
This one happens to be a nice picture of a dog and a cat. And this is the original. As you can see on here, we have a cord in the photo, which, you know, is nothing unusual to find something in the background or foreground you don't like. But then you have done this with it. And can you explain what you've done to these?
Well, first of all, I cropped it a little bit to bring it more in traditional portrait size, because that's an 8x10 crop, or the client actually wanted 11x14. But she was concerned in the original photograph that, and it doesn't show up on the original one on your right there, Matt, that the detail on the face wasn't showing. So I had to bring out the detail on the face and enhance the colors a little bit. And basically, I didn't change anything.
Okay.
But just enhancing.
So if there are shadows where you don't want them, you can lighten those areas, you can
Yep.
make people's eyes sparkle and so forth?
Sure.
That is fantastic. Let's take a look at another one over here. And this is a wedding. Now obviously somebody took this with their cell phone and they took it from a distance because there's all this background in the area. And there are other things like, I know as an amateur photographer, you don't want things like lights in the back of your head. They should be shining on you, not behind you. That creates unwanted shadows and such. And here I am trying to speak like a professional photographer. And then this is what you've done with it. Can you explain what you did?
Well, first of all, I lightened it up a little bit on the detail on the face so you can see the face a little better. I took out the, to the right of the gentleman's shoulder, I took the light off the wall, I fixed the emergency lighting, and I took out the exit sign.
Wow. Now, when you say took those out, what does that mean? I mean, you can't just cut it out.
No, it's all done pixel by pixel. You just blend them together.
Like
make
pencil
it look,
and eraser?
Pencil eraser. You know, digital working with Photoshop is no different. See, I started as an artist way back when, all right? And I got to be pretty good at matching colors and stuff like that with photographs, and we'd hand tint them. before color really came in. So you'd get a black and white print, and then you just hand color all the images. And of course, sometimes you had to fix things. So you would lighten it up and pencil it in. And so I just took those when I went at the Photoshop. I said, no, I don't have to mix paints anymore.
Perfect.
I can do it by pixel.
Wow. This one, I mean, I can't wait to show the final result on this one, but this is a church. Somebody, again, took that with their cell phone.
Took it, yeah.
And unfortunately, like, it's just natural. You're going to find this street sign was right in the middle of the front door. Well,
in the front window.
In the window, in the steeple in the front. And you get sometimes shadows where you don't want them. You get other unwanted images in there. So to make it look interesting, you made quite a few changes to this one. Okay, what did you do with this, other than eliminate the sign, which is the first thing that I see is obvious?
Well, there's actually 3 photographs that went into making this one, all right, because I was stuck with the fact that if I only used the one, how can I replicate the window where the sign was? So I had to go down about 25 or 30 feet, take another shot, and then blend the 2 together to make it look like it was actually no sign there.
You make that sound easy, but my thought is you're now taking a different photo from a different angle and possibly in a different lighting by the time you do that. So how do you compensate for all of it?
It's all done by pixel by pixel.
So you get down to the genetic level of the photograph, don't you?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, you also did something interesting about the lines and the coloring on here.
I actually created a piece of line art for it, and then I colorized it. I first of all created a black and white image, and I reversed it. Then I picked up all the highlights, and then I dropped in, I picked up the tonal detail back in it, and I created something that looks almost like a Norman Rockwell.
It does.
And it's very easy to do. It takes, about 15, 20 minutes to do it.
Well, in the end, it's not really just a photograph. It's more like a piece of artwork.
Mm-hmm.
So really I can take, cool.
In almost any photograph, I make a piece of artwork out of it.
Now, this next series over here, I really like. We have a gentleman in the Air Force getting married.
Yep.
And sharing their first kiss as husband and wife, I assume?
Can I tell you a little bit of the story?
Please, I'd love to hear the background on this.
He was scheduled for deployment. He was getting deployed the next day or 2. They went to the town hall, got married, and the clerk was taking some photographs as they did their vows. So she gave them the images. And he went on deployment, came back, and she called me up. She says, Phil, she said, I want to do something really neat for my husband. Can you fix the background up? And I says, I think I can help you.
You not only fixed the background, you completely erased the background and replaced it with this gorgeous American flag. Right? That's just a beautiful wall painted as a flag, and I love what you've done with this. Very patriotic, certainly appropriate to the gentleman and the situation. So now you did that similar with the presentation of their wedding rings. So here's the original where she's presenting his wedding band. And then you not only changed the background, you put them in a whole different ritzy location.
Yep.
So you're going to tell me pixel by pixel again.
Pixel by pixel.
I knew that.
You can almost put any. I did a series years ago of people in a studio where they wanted, it was raining and they wanted beach photographs, and I put a beach behind them.
Okay.
All right. This she liked, but the ones with the flag were better. She said when she showed it to her husband, he had a big grin on his face and tears came to his eyes. So.
Oh, I'm sure, because certainly being in the military, the flag in the background is just so appropriate and perfect for that photo. That's amazing. So all this is done within Photoshop.
Photoshop, and other tools. I mean, the camera is a tool. My big SLR is a tool. My underwater camera is a tool. And people say, well, I have a camera. I can be a professional photographer too. And I says, well, if you bought a saw, would that make you a carpenter or a hammer? Same difference. So I use all my tools. And what you have to do is learn the limitations of the tools you have and go with it. And, you know, expand them when you need and go for help when you need.
So now, my wife has taken some photography classes, and she's bought the fancy camera, and she does that because she likes to go to our children's sporting events, and the camera works much better than the cell phone in terms of action shots. Our smartphones just aren't that very good with it. The cameras are much quicker on the, I'm not even sure what to call that. You have fancy terms for it. But you don't have to invest in that to get a decent photo from what we've seen on here. A little bit of technology, a little post-editing, you can come up with something really beautiful off a very simple, quickly done shot from your cell phone. And I love the work you've done with that.
Well, thank you.
If somebody wants to contact you to learn more or to possibly get your help with their photos, how can they reach you?
Just go to my website, or just call me on my phone.
Okay, so your website at churasphotography.com.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. And if anybody would like to ask more questions about the Hot Seat TV show, or possibly to be a guest on the show, you can find out more information at timberwolfcoaching.com, and I'd be happy to help you. My name's Matt Randall, your host at the Hot Seat TV. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you, Phil Chura, for being here.
Thank you, Matt, for asking.